Well, hey there, friends. My name is Leslie Hughes. I am the principal of Punch Media and a LinkedIn optimization specialist. And today I had the pleasure of talking with my friend Adam Smith. Adam is the co founder of a company called Tension. And so we talked today all about UX, which stands for user experience. So I know I learned a lot today about user experience, and we talked also about the future of where technology is going. So I'm sure you are going to enjoy and learn insights from Adam the same way that I did. So enjoy my chat with Adam Smith from Tension. So hi, Adam.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Well,
I'm
at least
good.
with all the color that you've got going on there, it certainly is bright, and it's making me happy. So there's lots of color going on at your house.
Well, I mean, in this area, everywhere else is nothing like this. It's just chaos. Like I can literally see pajamas pretty much everywhere I turn. So
Oh, the fun things about working from home. Working from
yes,
home. So I do like the commute, though. I have to admit. I do love the commute. So
yeah.
anyway, so thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me. I'm so excited about this because we've known each other a long time. I think the last time we chatted, it's been like we worked together in the .com era of it was 2000, which is
Yeah,
crazy to think it was 21 years ago.
yeah.
When I talk to my students and I say I used to do digital marketing in a pre-Google world, they're like, what what kind of did you
How
also
do you do that?
uphill both ways in the snow with were you riding a horse and buggy? Because I mean we remember what it was like in a pre-Google world, don't we?
Yes, yes. Some of it was good. Some of it, no, not so much.
Well, I think what was kind of cool about back then is so like a lot of people that we didn't really know where the internet was going to go way back then. I mean, it was we sort of had an idea. We didn't know the social media and that we would be all come broadcasters at that point. But it was kind of an interesting time insofar as I think you and I both knew that the future was sort of going to go in that direction. And I don't know, we haven't really talked about how things have really changed since I knew you as a web designer back then, and now you're still in the same industry, quite frankly, which is most people end up burning out. I find that a lot of people that are doing web stuff kind of burn out, and we haven't talked about the burnout of that part of things.
I think I've had a number of burnouts. Um, yeah, it's a thing. But I love what I do. So burnout or not, I end up coming back, and me, I end up like disregarding health and sleep and all that stuff, and end up just working till 3 o'clock in the morning because it's what I love to do. I'm trying to do less of that. I'm trying to do less of that, but yeah, it's an evolution of where we were, but it's still very much the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. I have to formally introduce you to people who don't know you yet in just a second. But I was just, as you said, you're still staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning, which of course I see that you're up. We're Facebook friends, so of course I see that you're up at that time. And I remember those days when some of you guys would be like sleeping under your desk at the office back way back when. And
I appreciate that you say some of us because it was only me. I was the only one that did that. Um, and I did it very often, but thank you for making it seem like I wasn't crazy and potentially homeless, really. So, yeah.
It was some crazy times. So you were always so committed way back then. I mean, you went over and above, as I said, sleeping under the desk, being there all night, being there the next day. And I sometimes will communicate with my students about how tough it can be working in an agency. I mean, we really, for all intents and purposes, were working in an agency at that point. And I think some of them think that it's going to be all like, oh, it's going to be la la party time, and we had those too. We had a lot of party time, but we worked our buns off too at the same time. So,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
that hasn't changed.
Hence sleeping under the desk. I don't sleep under my own desk at home, which is good. It's an evolution.
As we become older and are still sleeping under desks. Anyway, I have to introduce you because we're gonna end up like talking about like catching up on old times. So, so now I do this a little bit of an intro as if we don't know each other, but anyway, we do. So Adam is an expert in user experience. He's worked at Rogers Communications, PwC, CBC, and the Hospital for Sick Kids, just to name a few different organizations that you work for to really help them optimize the user experience online. And so I pulled this from your some of your bio too, is that you're a champion for human-centered solutions that converge with business needs and objectives. You bring a unique mix of customer experience, user experience, visual design, technical skills, and capabilities together with business acumen and research to focus on creating outstanding products, services, solutions, and experiences that mutually benefit the user, the customer, and the business. So in your role, it's not just sort of, just slapping stuff up on a website. It's a lot bigger than that.
Yeah. I mean, back when like we worked together, there was a little bit of slapping stuff on the webpage, but that's like, it's evolved tremendously from there. What I do now is more a mix of user experience and customer experience. I try not to do any front end development anymore, but somehow I just keep getting roped back into that. It's really about like helping companies develop products that are going to resonate and meet the needs of their market, or create a need even, right? And help them find a way to productize and make a good market fit. So it's much more than design, but to me it's a natural evolution of what design really is. Because if you don't take into consideration the customer, you don't take into consideration the business, and then the financial needs of the employees, then it's just art, and design is really about leveraging visual as a means to engineer outcomes. And that's what really gets me up in the morning. It's never ending. There's no end to the potential challenges that you can sort of wake up and face, and that's so exciting every single day.
Well, it must be so much harder too, Adam. Like as back in the day when we were in the year 2000 and so forth, there weren't that many websites. So figuring out how to get the user from point A to wherever the objective is. And I remember, I don't know which accounts you worked on. I just remember working on the Prozac account for Eli Lilly and having to sort of create. They wanted people to self-identify as maybe if they felt like that they were going through, they were depressed or needed medication. So they wanted to have people sort of figure out how to use this sort of checklist or self-assessment tool. And yet it was buried way deep inside the microsite at that time. We had a little microsite for that. And so so your job is to really help people, help that become more intuitive, because we kind of know, it's one of those things where it's like, it's not even verbal. Like you can't sort of explain to someone, well, we need to get them from here to there. And what is the process because it's so nonlinear. Like it's so weird to think about, because usually you take someone through a story, you go, okay, turn here or turn left or turn right or whatever. But on the web, it's like, there's so much information out there. Doesn't it get overwhelming?
It can, but I think of it more along the lines of wayfinding. So when you think about how you create signage in a city, it's not about somebody getting from A to B. It's about somebody being dropped somewhere and being able to get where they need to go. And it's very much the same kind of model for experience design from a navigational or content hierarchy perspective. I think where the challenge really starts and ends, though, regardless of whether you're working on an informational website or a product or service that's supposed to solve problems for customers, it's really about speaking to the customer rather trying to get what you want from the customer. So, for example, in the Prozac example, where they were looking to help people self-assess, I'll be honest, I don't remember much about that project, except their logo is like burned into the back of my brain. I don't really know what else I did on that project, to be quite honest, but it's there. I did something, but like when a company wants to know something, especially something potentially as sensitive as depression, it's not about asking them the answers that you want. It's about helping them get to the answers they need. And it's just a shift in perspective, but it can make all the difference in the world for the user.
So is that where design thinking comes in? Because I don't know much about design thinking. It seems to be a buzzword term, and I tried to do a little research on it, but I figured you'd explain it to me. And so from what I understand, sort of design thinking is out of the box thinking, that sort of platitude of out of the box thinking. So is that what it is?
So, I mean, you take design thinking back like to the 50s or 60s, really. But it was popularized in the 1990s by a company called IDEO, which is one of the top tier like design firms all time, multidisciplinary. They do physical products, they do architecture and all sorts of stuff. But they really made their process, their design process concrete, and in combination with the D School, sort of really brought this into the mainstream, and it's tremendously gaining popularity over the last 5 or 10 years, really. I mean, everyone's doing it now. It's called design thinking because it allows you to think like a designer, and the first, like it generally starts in 5 steps, right? So we have like empathy, we have definition of what the problem is, ideating around a solution, prototyping that solution to make sure that it's the right thing and for the right people, and then testing to make sure that your implementation of that idea is correct. That's kind of the framework, but a lot of times what ends up happening is like companies will use design thinking as more of a form of theater. And it's kind of like, get everybody in the room and we'll talk about ideas and we'll work together and we'll co-create. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't solve a lot of problems because it's not starting from a place of empathy, but it's also not starting from a place of purpose. And, one of the most important things when you're designing is understanding the why. The who is always important. I mean, you can throw human-centered design around, user-centered design. These are all because when you want to design a solution, you really only have to focus on the human, whether it be an employee or your customer. And that's really like the whole crux of it. I mean, basically, when you think about, or when I think about how a designer thinks, it's really about like zooming in and out simultaneously, right? So you want to like zoom into like the microscopic level, but also at the same time kind of keep that macro perspective. So if you're in there tweaking something, how does that impact like the whole ecosystem of the product? And it's with design thinking, one of the more popular models for that is like the double diamond. So you start with the problem space, and hopefully you have customers in the room. Hopefully you have representatives from frontline where they're talking to the customers, people from leadership, people from like that do hands-on work in an organization that have coverage on everything. Because when you're trying to design a problem, having all of the pieces of information, all of those inputs is tremendously important, and it's impossible to do unless you do like a 6-month research project. So design thinking, the goal is to bring everyone into the same room, talk about it openly, and then co-define what real problems are, and then dig until you get to the root causes. And then, so you sort of look at everything, and then you come down the other side of that first diamond and you start to hone in on what the real problems we're solving are. And as you do that, it's a prioritization process of what's most important to the business and what's most important to the customer. And then you go the other way. So now that you have your problems most worth solving, you then look at all the potential solutions for that. And in a proper process, you'll look at how much it costs, how much time it takes, what's the level of effort, and what's the general benefit of each of these solutions. And then you boil that down and you find the real things that matter, whether it be to the business, to the user, or to both. And that's what you focus on. So it's that process is generally quite effective. But again, pardon me, if you don't start from purpose, none of it really matters, because it's all like, people forget, especially in larger organizations, what the purpose of that company is. And humans resonate with products and services that resonate with them. And they're not going to resonate with a product that's just there to make money. They're going to resonate with a product that itself has purpose. And that's really kind of the key. Like with if you don't mind me doing a little bit of a plug, with with tension, one of the things that we do is we always start from purpose, whether you're a large organization or a small one, and really start to understand why you're doing this as an organization. What do you stand for? And that becomes part of the DNA of every solution that we build. And it's proven tremendously like valuable, because it keeps people on track as to why the business exists and what they're trying to do and whom they're trying to be to their customers. And that's equally as valid in a B2B scenario as it is in a B2C. So yeah, I'm rambling, but
No, it's all good. It's all great stuff.
yeah, it's a great process, but it's you know, it can be applied to anything. You know, like you can use it for a product, but you can also use it as a method to uncover you know, optimizations in your supply chain. Like there's so many ways to use it. The problem is, again, it's just more often than not theater.
Well, that's so fascinating because I think a lot of people would sort of assume that what you do is like, oh, I just need these few pages thrown up on a website. Because I remember back in the day when we were working together, it was always like, but how long does it take? It's the web. You can put it up right away. Like there was always sort of this expectation that everything was just like, well, the web is fast, so just get her done, get her done. And then so like, to your point though, to reverse engineer what are the objectives, like what do we need to get out of this, and each person from the senior executives are all like, what's the ROI? How much money are we throwing at this? How much we're going to get back by it? And then understanding the user experience, it's confusing as heck to have all of those people who have different objectives to get to where they need to go.
It's a balancing act, for sure. But that, you know, if you have a solid um, prioritization process, that's, you know, more quantitative than it is qualitative, then it gets kind of easy to decide what you should and shouldn't be building, and how you should. You know, one of the things, especially as it comes back to user experience, like one of the things we as an industry on the whole, and I'm not saying it to everyone, but generally user experience designers and designers in general don't like to talk about our KPIs. And I mean, that's a big miss, because the experience that you create can be tremendously valuable, and see significant returns for the business. But we don't track them, we don't measure them, we rarely talk about them, and that's a big missed opportunity, because you know, I've had the opportunity to work in certain situations and certain clients where or organizations where those KPIs were measured and they were just mind blowing, and it was directly tied to design. I mean, there were other factors obviously involved, but you know, we could easily tie certain business metrics back to the position of a button, or the how close a CTA was to a piece of data, just from an emotional reactionary standpoint and from a behavioral standpoint. I mean, these kind of small tweaks and iterations can make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. Because like, to your point, like who thinks that, like marketers should be thinking about those key performance indicators. They should be thinking about, but we don't, you know, we don't necessarily think of. I was on a webinar last night with a doctor who focuses on analytics, and he's an ad fraud specialist, and it was really interesting. Yeah, it was so cool. And so to your point though, like he was showing like the hot spots on where people's eyeballs go, and all that kind of stuff is stuff that, you know, from an outsider's perspective, somebody who is using the web, it's kind of like, you know, you're like, more people are just frustrated. Like, I just want to get what I want when I want it. And they don't necessarily think about, well, you know, like the business doesn't necessarily think, because we're so, the quote I say all the time is, when you're inside the jar, you can't see the label. And we're all like guilty of doing that from a professional standpoint of, well, we know what we want to sell. We know what we want to get out there, but we don't actually take that path to purchase. We're not actually going on it from an objective standpoint. So I guess that's kind of some of what you do, is to sort of take a look at it from a strategic standpoint on how do we get there. Because I think a lot of people, correct me if I'm wrong, would think that you just create websites. Like that's, and you, like you said, you don't, it's just like you're lumped into that all over batch of, not only do you build, this is where people's brains are, not only do you build websites, Adam, but you create all the graphic design, you build the website, you do all the you know, Google Analytics, and you also know how to build computers from scratch. Because I find that anybody's like, when you're kind of in that kind of role, I'm sure you're called on all the time from people going like, I don't understand how I can to plug in my computer. You're expected to do everything, but really your role is different than all of those hats. You understand all of those pieces.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's not what you do.
No. I mean, I at my new co-working location, there is more of the like fixing of computers kind of thing. But I have a good relationship with my coworkers, and you know, generally, I that's really not the area of expertise, but you know, there is a lot of confusion around user experience, and you know, it's whether it be user experience or visual design or UI design or product design or interaction designer, or we love as an industry to make up really great new names and get super siloed, because we think that makes sense, but it doesn't, because all that it does is it makes it even more difficult for people to actually understand what any of us do. But I mean, that's great. You want to, you know, you're a product, cool product designer, it's fine. You know, like it's really, it's complicated to a degree, but I mean, when you boil it down, like user experience is a very specific discipline, right? It's based more in human factors. Visual design is more more about the emotion and the messaging and the personality that you want to build or imbue into a product or service. And you know, you look at a web developer, for example, you know, they're really the engineers of the system that runs like the engine behind. They're very distinct. You know, I personally went out of my way to learn as much about every one of them as possible because I think it makes me better at what I do. Maybe it also makes it more difficult for people to specifically understand what I do because I do so many different things. But you know, it all started from for learning web development because developers would tell me things weren't possible. And I'm like, kind of think they are. And then I would show it to them. And you know, that's petty. But that's me. It also like, I mean, it's something that makes me a better designer, right? Because if I know the front end, what's capable, what's not capable, then I'm going to design the right solutions. I'm not going to design wishful thinking. You know, user experience was not something that I started in. You know, it was something that as I started to progress into more complex systems and products and creating the UI for it, you know, at the time there was no understanding that, you know, you should probably also have a UX designer because remember, I'm old. But you know, as time progressed, you know, there were more and more UXers coming onto the scene. It was more mainstream at least, and I loved that side of it. I was like, that's where you solve the things, and you know, that pulled me into that direction. And you know, I'd say probably for the last 10, 12 years, UX has really been my focus. I still do the other things, but UX is definitely my my favorite.
So why? So what about it do you love?
Um, it's problem solving, right? Like as I mentioned before, like there is never going to be an end of problems to solve, and there's never going to be an end to new innovative ways to solve it. We can always make it better. You know, like when I first started using computers, they were green line and command line. You know, and then we went to the GUID with the original Mac, and then from there we went to the web, and now we're going into augmented reality through visual but also auditory experience. And all of this is really, it's still centered around the user. It's still the same thing. It's just different mediums to present it. So, I mean, for us to think that this two-dimensional world that we're usually working in, from whether it be a web or software, this is just a stop on the way.
Do you have like augmented reality stuff? Like have you got like my son has one up in his room and I can't go on it. It makes my head hurt. Do you have you played around with that kind of stuff?
Yes. So I mean, I've had a number of I've used a number of different systems. I personally have a PSVR because it's fun. My kid likes it. But I honestly, like, I played it for a good year and then I don't have time. Every now and then I'll go down. I have like a PSVR aim, which is like a little gun thing. And you get in there and you actually get to shoot people. That's fun. I like that, especially after a challenging day. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I enjoy playing around with, but it's still so in its infancy. as an interaction model. That I think we've got a long way to go before consumers are going to accept the technology. No one's going to walk around with like this big thing on their head all day, and until we can either get it in like sunglass form or in a contact lens, yeah, it's going to be pretty niche. But I mean,
Yeah, like when I watch those Black Mirror episodes, I think, they're not really that far off. Black
no,
Mirror, insofar as like where the future is headed for us technologically, and it scares the living Jesus out of me. It scares me
yeah,
so much that
yeah,
these things are they. It's kind of like, remember back when they used to have, what was it, the Truman Show, or like these reality shows, and people were like, that's never gonna happen. Yeah, and then you've got the
yeah.
Kardashians and the all these reality shows and things like that. It's like, how like, so you see that's well, I mean, I've seen some of the like the virtual reality, insofar as like I haven't left the house since COVID, so I bought glasses for myself, tried them all on online and things like that, and
Mm.
so these things are happening. And have you had that experience with doing that kind of stuff with some of your clients, any of that stuff?
I haven't had a chance to do any in practice. In terms of like playing around with the UX side of it, I've toyed with some things, but it's not something that I feel like I'm personally or Tension is ready to offer as a service at this point.
Yeah.
I'd
Well,
love to. I would love to. Trust me.
I mean, there's not enough demand yet. People are still sort of freaked out by it, I think, and I mean, I think we're still. To your point, I think we're still. In some ways, I think we're still a long way off, and then the other way, I mean, I just saw a documentary this week about 5G,
Mhm.
and I'm again like, in some ways, I get so excited about technology, and then I also get completely overwhelmed and terrified about where we're going to go as all this stuff continues to evolve.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if technology's terrifying or if it's the people that use it.
Yeah.
Um, in some circumstances, the people that design it.
But we're so far behind too, like other countries. I mean, I'm sure you're following what's going on. China is very. I mean, I've heard so many things about, like that episode of Black Mirror called Nosedive. When,
Mm.
yeah, so she's like, and to obtain sort of collateral or clout or any of that kind of stuff, you have to be an influencer, and so the whole story is about her sort of downfall of, I won't get into it, but I hear that's happening in China too, where these influencers are able to. So this is happening in real time, that influencers are able to get better seats on airplanes or better rental cars or things like that. Where it's just like, oh my gosh, like, and that these like virtual reality sort of clouds above their heads, sort of giving their. I don't know if that's happening insofar as like the ratings someone would get, and it's just mind-boggling. I mean, part of me is excited because it actually, and I think you'd agree with me, some of it's exciting because people are being exposed for kind of who they are in a way, and that can kind of be a good thing. But then the court of public opinion, where the cancel culture and the cult of getting rid of people because of what they're doing online, it hurts it all hurts my brain. I love it and hate it all at the same time. As a marketer, I love it. As a human being,
Yeah.
it's terrifying.
Well, I mean, some things are just best left to discover on your own.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
It's
Anyway.
and so there's there are very few people out there, but there are some that don't even use technology. They're not even using it. Like, but then I think of people like my mom, who's she's in her 70s, and she's my iPad. It's kind of nice living actually in the same house as your mom, who's a senior, and your son, who's a Gen Z, and you go, you two just figure it out, because then I don't have to get involved in the middleman. But it is interesting from that perspective too, Adam, as I watch the way my son, and I'm sure your kids are the same way, how intuitive it just is for them, and how they just it's like a fish to water. Seniors are kind of like, they're sort of like, I can't get my head wrapped around how this works, and why is it when I click on this one thing and I end up like in another different, she doesn't even know how to put in keywords and things like that. So as we're looking at different multi-gener, like, you probably have to take all of that into consideration on like who the target audience is and how they experience online and that kind of stuff too, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I've designed systems for governments that you pretty much have to solve for everyone. And that includes people who have really bad internet. I mean, I think that one broke my brain. Like, how do I design something on the internet that solves for bad internet? Anyway, obviously there are considerations you can make, but it has to be inclusive. There are ways to do that. The easiest is lowest common denominator, but that limits the experiences you can deliver. You got to find a balance, right? But in user experience, in the way that you're describing, like kids are able to just pick stuff up, it's because I'll just say it, user experience designers have improved their craft significantly and honed in experiences and leveraged and borrowed and stole patterns from other UX designers and popular products. So I'm not always the guy that's going to be running down promoting patterns in UX all the time, as anyone who knows me can attest to. But it's those patterns that make things just understandable. Like my 4-year-old can pick up a new app and just use it and never have to ask me a question. Maybe the first couple of apps she had some questions. Now she can just navigate on her own, and that's because we've built upon common knowledge and common experience and common expectations in our user base, and leverage that to create products that are intuitive. They're just really learned.
Do you think Mac was like a game like Steve Jobs and like that, like was that the big game changer? Because that from a user experience, and that's why we became sort of a Mac family. I hear from other people that actually know things about technology, they're like, nah, Mac's not the best, but is it from a user standpoint? I knew to get my mom a MacBook or like an iPad because I just was like, this is going to be so much easier than you trying to navigate around something else. It is much more intuitive. And were they the big game changers as far as usability?
So, I'm not going to get into the argument of like Mac versus PC because it's just not worth it because PCs suck. I'm just, but like when it was a massive game changer, 100%. If you go back, like I think it was in the 50s or perhaps even earlier, one of the first attempts at creating a computer visualization system was a big goggle on somebody's head that tried to translate data into 3-dimensional objects in the screen. So basically VR.
Wow.
In the 50s. But computationally, that was not possible. Like there was just not enough horsepower to render information fast enough in that format. So they had to look to something else. And it's as much as Macs get credit for the graphical user interface. Steve Jobs stole it from Xerox PARC, where they had pretty much mapped out everything. And what they did was they leveraged patterns from the real world and metaphors from the real world to create the desktop and applications that sat on your desktop that you use, like a calculator or a spreadsheet. I guess a ledger, something paper before. I don't know. But anyway, they leverage these things that are familiar to people, even in a almost like illustrative fashion on the computer, on the 2-dimensional screen. So it made this 2-dimensional interface to a computer make sense. Like there's no such thing as a file really in your file system. The folders don't really exist. They're just references. But the idea of a file is something that the human mind can understand. I want to get that. Where is that? But it's actually it's one or series of characters within a long series of characters stored inside your computer. So that sort of metaphorical, like representation of what a computer was, that shifting of how people, like what it really is to what people actually are looking to understand. That is probably one of the first most powerful examples of user experience ever.
It's all hurting my brain. I don't know how you keep it all straight, because this is like, it's really complicated stuff. I mean, I'm sure you're probably like, you're so used to doing it. You know, you've been doing this for a long time, which is terrifying that it's been a long time that we've been doing this. But you're so immersed in it that you probably don't even realize that other people don't think the way that you do in a way. And it must be frustrating sometimes because, as I said, like people just have these
all the time.
ideas of what you do.
Yeah,
You know?
people
Yeah.
are just frustrated. No, I'm just joking. No, I mean I nerd out on this stuff. Like, like if I'm going to be reading a book, I'm not going to be reading a novel. I'm going to be reading about this, or I'm going to be reading about like human psychology and how that relates. Like whether it be behavioral or whether it be like people's understanding of the past. Even these are things that I like to bring into my own brain and mix stuff up. um I can't say enough about, like, from a design perspective, consuming other ideas just as often as possible just gives you more ammunition to create new ideas, right? Because it gives you more nodes that you can connect in your network um, to abstract a concept that's looked at like, no, that's the way it is. But if you can take it and the way I see it, and I can only assume this is how other designers see it. But when I look at a problem, have you ever seen one of those explosion diagrams where it's like an object and then they like explode it out and all the nuts and bolts and like pieces of it are sort of shown how it would come together? So
Okay.
that's what I like to do. Like I'll take something and I'll explode it out and then I'll look at every single thing inside and then try to find connections to other things that I know or things that are sort of arm's length. Um, Something that people are more familiar with as a concept, and then take whatever people have familiarity with from that and then try to apply it to that piece and then put it back together and see what that does. um, and it's a constant like opening up, tweak, put it back together, and like seeing how that starts to meld, and then it starts to create almost an interaction language. um, this is sounding really nerdy, but like that's kind of how I think. I
Yeah.
don't know how
I
to
think
explain it.
I imagine it's like like the movie in Beautiful Mind, when the guy just like everything's sort of in this like up in the air, and you just, because it's not linear. You're not, it's not like you're going from like A to Z. I mean, the pings and the, where everything's are going, the fact that you're able to sort of process that and understand it from a behavioral standpoint, from what the client wants, like all of that stuff is just like you're spinning a lot of plates at the same time.
Yeah, it's that, but it's also like Mad Men. So, they're working on something, they can't figure it out. They go out, they get completely blasted, and they're sitting somewhere at the end of the night, and they're having a random conversation, and someone says something, and it just, there it is. That's the solution.
Okay.
And it seems so simple, but that's it, right? Like you take everything apart, you index it, you categorize it, you think about it in all these different ways, and then it's just one thing. And it's just that tip of the iceberg, that last straw that broke the camel's back, and it all just sort of crumbles into place.
Mm.
Crumbles probably not it's not really positive, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, and it's funny that you say that. What popped into my mind when you were talking about all this stuff is there's a guy that I follow who calls himself a digital anthropologist by the name of Brian Solis. I don't know if you've ever seen him in his work. And he said the social media, specifically, he's talking about social media, is much more about psychology and sociology than it is about technology. And I was like,
Yep.
oh, well, that's why it makes sense to me, because I'm not technologically savvy at all. I sometimes don't even know how to plug in a computer, quite frankly. But when it comes to marketing and understand, and I took psychology in university, and I'm a nerd like you. Like I love to watch and learn and think about how do people process information, and how do we, why do we come up with objections, and how does our brain work in a way that stops us from doing things or allows us to do like that behavioral economic stuff. Like I'm such a junkie for all of that stuff, the social selling things of how to get people from A to Z, and it's all about rapport and emotions and all that other stuff. And so again, like that's what makes me fascinated with social and digital, is really because it is more about people than it is about technology, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so is user experience, right? Like it all comes from the human's ability to interact with, and how a product interacts with a human, right? Um, it's really psychological. It's all based in bias. It's based in past experience. Um, we try to leverage what we can from what people know, and build things that not only like do what people are expecting, but you want to build in a little delight here and there, so that there's some joy in it. And even in like the most mundane business to business applications, there are ways that you can engineer delight, just by surprising and presenting things to users in a way that they'd never expected.
And also you've got to take into consideration how are people using, and this is what I teach in some of my classes, is that, we're living in a mobile first world, but then when it comes to certain interactions, I want to go back to my laptop to buy things, to like research things, to really dive deeper. So it's like, it's where the psychology is, are people going to it or is it coming to me? Are different, it's using things from such a different perspective too. And again, as a consumer, we just want what we want when we want it, regardless of whether it's, like the app or the mobile experience and it's just like, there's just so many components in it to make sure that from a quality, and also I'm sure, you have to check against different kinds of browsers and different kinds of like all that kind of stuff that all has to sort of go into play.
Yeah.
Coming up with an idea and how to roll it out or how to fix things, how to tweak things. And so it's,
yeah. And there's I mean, everyone will say that like mobile first, it's a lovely term. I mean, obviously you have to be on mobile, just by the very nature of our busy lives. It's not because people expect something to work on mobile. It's because people don't have often that much time to be sitting down in front of a computer, not doing work or what they're supposed to be doing. So you do have to create the right experience for those, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to create the same experience, right? Like what makes sense in mobile doesn't necessarily make sense from an experience perspective on desktop. Obviously you want to, from an efficiency perspective, not reinvent the wheel for each of them, but that's not to say that you shouldn't tailor your experiences to the medium it's being enjoyed in.
so crazy. It's just you're hurting my brain. I think I've got, obviously I've got a bunch of questions that I had prepared myself, and we've just gone, and I'm just so fascinated with all the different things. So do you think that that's the biggest like when people go like, you're at back when we used to see people and you say, oh, so Adam, tell me what you do. How do you explain that to people, what you do? Or do you just sort of just say, oh, I do you just make up some stuff that they can understand what you do?
So I went through a very long period where I would just say I do some things and I would leave it at that. But I don't know if that had to do with not wanting to explain my career or actually just wanting to be mysterious, but I would do that. Today, I do say that I do user experience and customer experience, which then is a whole other layer of what. But if they ask questions, I'll answer them. If they don't, generally I'll leave it as is. But there is, to your point, there's some pretty big misconceptions about what we do, when we do it, when we should be involved. I think one of the biggest things is, a company or anyone who's building a product or service or creating an additional digital play, they'll map out exactly what they think it should be, and then they'll pass it off to the UX designer to make it easy or to map out their idea. And that's kind of a ass backwards way of going about it. To not consider the patterns and the experience and the human expectations that user experience practitioners bring to the table right when you're starting to try and figure out your product is like asking or building a Model T like car and then asking somebody to retrofit it with a Ferrari body. It's just like, oh, it'll look nice, but it's not going to go that fast.
So, like, are there, like, with the skill set that you have, does every company, like every big company, have a UX person on the team?
I would say that most large customer-facing organizations have like a large or at least a UX team. I would hope that they have a research team that focuses on in-market products or testing products before they go to market. You know, and the UX team will generally either work directly with the visual design team as a single unit. If they're lucky, they actually work with their front-end developers as a pod, and they'll work with their product owners or the business side in if they're lucky, again, co-create the solutions before you get down to mapping out what they actually should perform like.
And so you've been working a lot with like, I mean, I look at your website and I go, wow, like what do you not do? But but insofar as like you've been working with companies out of Silicon Valley too, right? So startups. So that probably is kind of exciting because they've got an idea and they just don't know how to execute it. Is that what you love to do as opposed to doing something that's already established, or like do you like both? Or
I mean, it depends, you know, like we've been very fortunate. Like since we started Tension, I would say most of our clients are startups in various states of start. So some, like we've got a couple that have been just completely, we got nothing, let's get started. And that's exciting because you get to be a part of the definition of who that company is, you know, what they stand for, what they believe in, and then you can actually build that right into the DNA of the products you build, and it really comes through when it's interacting with customers, and I love that. We have another customer right now, which ironically, the founder and I sort of whiteboarded this idea, I'd say about seven or 8 years ago in Silicon Valley. And I decided to go a different route and experiment with full-time employment. It was fun. But yeah, so he's come back now, and I can't say too much about what we're doing, but we're very much reinventing it. We're taking it to something that delights, and it's very much that, like taking that model in the same way that, you know, the human interface. I mean, I don't want to. Okay, that sounds arrogant, but we're taking something that is pretty straightforward and we're flipping around to make it much more consumable and powerful at the same time. So that's really exciting. You know, we love to work with startups. They're fun. We also like to work with large organizations for a number of reasons. You know, I've had excellent work working with a government. You know, as odd as that sounds.
Because we've all dealt with the government and they are so backwards. I mean, I don't know if I was telling you before. Yeah. I actually had to still, up until COVID, I still had to fax certain documents. I'm still, like, they're still accepting fax. Like, they still want you to communicate with them via fax. And like, it's 2021. What's going on? Like, and now COVID is sort of fast tracked a lot of different, like, people have got to be more online now because of all of it. So government especially, I mean, they're dragging their heels in the technological age. There's no doubt. Surprised they still don't have horse and buggy out the front. Wait, you know what I mean? Like, it's tough.
Yeah. It's, you know, everybody talks about digital transformation like it's a thing that you can just sort of flip on.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you think about like large organizations or governments or telcos or, you know, banks, like their infrastructures are legacy, like in the same way that I'm legacy. But I can evolve, technology can't. You know, it's very difficult and very expensive to take something that, you know, does the job and then replace your entire infrastructure that runs your entire bank, let's say, you know, or like turn on real-time monitoring for a telco. One of the products I was working on, we had to do that in order to satisfy the needs of the product, we actually had to go down.
Did my internet connect?
Okay. I think it might have.
Yeah, I think
I'm sorry. And
I told you, keep talking.
Sorry about that.
No, it was my.
I know, and I didn't. I did the exact opposite of what I was told. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Are you there? Are you
Usually
there?
I can't. Yeah. Usually people can't get me to stop talking. So I'm sorry.
No, I lost you. I don't know where you went. You were like legacies and changing things. It's expensive and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But when the need arises, or the value presents itself, it's worth the investment.
Yeah, but it's tough because you got, and I even have I found this and I put it into my into one of my PowerPoint presentations, and it's sort of like the first little snippet is like all these departments are all siloed and the customer experience is like all like this, but at the end of the day they just want this, and it's like, wow, like just people don't necessarily conceptualize how involved it is to change things and to change things in such a way that is kind of seamless from a user standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest challenges with that is, when you're dealing with different departments, whether they're siloed or not, each department will have their own KPIs. Those KPIs will not necessarily be aligned with another department. So what's good for one is not good for the other.
Right.
And at the end of the day, none of it is good for the customer. So it becomes really difficult to bring change into an organization that's not willing to change at the core, because that's what it requires half the time.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your new. So you used to be Liquid Reality, and you're the former version of Adam. Wasn't even 1.0. It was probably like already 2.0 Liquid Reality standpoint, and now you're Tension. So what? So the branding has changed. How did you come up with Tension? What's the branding around that?
So anyone that's worked with me, just being in a room with me, that's why I called it that. No, oftentimes situations can be tense with me, but I speak my mind.
I don't know the person. You keep telling me this. I'm like, that's not the Adam I know. I mean, we've always got along really well.
Oh no, I'm a nice guy. But when it's the right thing for the product or the right thing for the customer, I will stand my ground, and I will say things that others are probably thinking but not willing to say because it's not politically correct. I was independent for so long, I could care less about politically incorrect. So, tension is something that I was sort of trying to figure out what worked really well with Liquid Reality, and going client side for a while, and working in consulting. I looked at the models that were working there. And I tried to find like what very much resonated with me, is that as much as I have always promoted that user experience should be in as early as possible, what I realized in the later years of the experiment, is that it's not just about user experience. It's about UX and design and development and product or business, being a single unit from day one to delivery. And that's the model that we're promoting with Tension. And it's the tension between the needs of each of those roles. So, what's good for technology isn't always what's right for user experience, vice versa. And that goes all the way around. But when you can find the right synergy across all of those different perspectives, then you have the right tension, which is better than balance, to actually create something that's going to be, one, meaningful, two, going to hit the right business KPIs, and three is going to be something that's manageable from a technical standpoint moving forward. And that's what Tension stands for.
So what would make your organization, this is a hard question, it's a question I ask, or you or your organization, whichever one you want to talk about, different than everybody else out there? Like it's a tough question. It's the one that I don't know if I asked you that before, and I'm kind of putting you on the hot seat for that. But it's something that we all had to find our unique value propositions. So have you ever gone through that exercise to find out what makes you and your stuff different than everybody else?
I don't think I necessarily had to go through any kind of like rigorous process to, to figure that out. One, as we talked about my experience, I've got 25 years in this. I've played in pretty much all aspects of it, at least enough to be dangerous. And this time around, I've partnered up with a good friend of mine, Glenn Taylor, who also has 25 years of experience and really doubles down on the design side.
It's dinosaur years in from a technological standpoint. Like when you think 25, like my college students are 20 years old. They're grown. They're fully functioning grown human beings. They're 20 years old, and that we've been doing this longer than they've been. Just a little terrifying. You're probably like me. You probably still think you're 20 in your head. Actually, I know you still think you're 20 in your head.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a point of discussion. Of course, but yeah, I mean, between the two of us, and the people that we work with, like, we are bringing a more holistic perspective. We're bringing actually like 4 or 5 perspectives to the project from the beginning and all the way through the end. Like when we are engaged with a client, we can eliminate handoffs in that fashion, right? Like there's no handoff from business to UX, and they were like, oh, what the hell did they mean? Okay, I'm going to make this the best I can, and there's back and forth, and then we toss that over the fence to visual design, and then they toss it over the fence to technology, and it's just broken telephone all the way through. The way that we approach it is everybody's there. There is no broken telephone because we're co-creating the solution together. In the same way that design thinking is really supposed to co-define the problem and the solution together, we take that model and we actually build that into our engagement model. And that allows us to really have all of the important voices in the room designing. Like we're going to be sitting there with the developer and we're all going to be on the whiteboard. It's not like only the designer gets to hold the marker. No, we're working together, and we're finding trade-offs and balances, bartering, maybe begging and whatever to get it done. But when we do it together, not only is everybody informed, but everybody believes in the solution all the way through the end. So at the end of the day, when we're getting close to launch, it's not like, well, we could trade this feature off because I don't know what it's for. You know what it's for because you built it, you designed it, you know why we're doing this. And it takes so much of the stress out of the partnerships in a development team that it's remarkable.
Mm-hmm. So obviously,
no tension in tension.
No, yeah, there's no tension. So like obviously, like there, I'm just sort of thinking because my brain, the reason why I can't even, my mouth can't even catch up with where my brain is going, because I know a few people that have been in like sort of web development and things like that, and I think what's kind of sad and what's scary is that there's a lot of hacks out there, a lot of people that be like, yeah, I can build that, I can build, and they don't, and like the people that I know that hard code, that still are hard coding, that still understand what works and how it's not going to break along the way and things like that, there's probably still a lot of snake oil salesmen out there that are promising people that they can deliver on things. And so I imagine that there's probably not that many people with your expertise, being able to sort of go, okay, so really, why are we doing this in the way that we're doing it and stuff like that. So,
I mean, it's, there's a lot of really good programs in UX, there are some like get a job fast programs out there as well. And it's, the market does tend to get flooded with people with less qualifications than they should. And that's not good for anybody. And I know, like, from a hiring perspective, sometimes you just need a body in a seat. But that does no one like that. That's just a disservice to everyone.
Yeah.
Like the client, to yourself, to that individual. Yeah, I have a lot of opinions on that, but that's probably for another day.
Well, I just don't even know if they're actually teaching this kind of stuff at school. They probably have specialized courses at some point in some with some fashion or another, but you know, not that I've seen that people will, you know, have a little bit like just enough to be dangerous of experience doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
I mean, at the university level, there's a lot of really strong programs out there.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, there's human factors, there's human computer interaction. There's a lot of different names these programs have gone under, but at the end of the day, there's you know, there's user experience as a practice of that understanding. Um, and then there are those like myself who sort of, you know, not necessarily stumbled upon it, but sort of built up that experience over, as you said, dinosaur years.
Yeah, no kidding, right? So where do you, and we're kind of, you know, I can't believe it's the hour-long mark, but where do you think things are going to go in the future? Like, how, like, do you think that things are going to continue, like, you know, as you know, I tell my students, like, back in my day, you know, we used to go to the store to get our VCRs and like we'd rent it for the weekend and invite all the neighbors over, and now we're watching television shows and we're streaming on these little babies. So, I mean, I don't know. Do you have any snapshot or like ideas of where things might even go in the next 2 years?
Uh, 2 years? I don't know.
Well,
Five?
next 2 years anyway. Like, I know the Internet of Things was supposed to be the big thing. It was supposed to already have happened by now, but I guess we're waiting on this 5G stuff to roll out, or
Well, the thing about the Internet of Things is that only the things are on it, so you would never know. It's really like how everything is interconnected, right? Like how my door lock can unlock from my watch. That's the Internet of Things, right?
that's
These
crazy.
things are on the internet. There's no human interaction component to the Internet of Things. You know, there's a few things that are going to change UX in a fundamental level, and the experience that people have with digital experiences. One is obviously crypto and the blockchain, not Bitcoin or cryptocurrency specifically, but how the blockchain really sort of changes how we store and manage data, and that will have a very significant impact on experience. The other thing is, you know, artificial intelligence and the capabilities of AI to really bring much more of an assistive, unprompted experience to users. So, you know, whether it's just a little robot guy, like not like Clippy, but that would come and, you know, be able to help you identify ways to better do the work that you're doing, leveraging the data that you know you have actually put into that system, and how you use that system. It can help you optimize your experience, and it should be able to restructure itself in accordance with that. So that's those are two major things. The other thing is, as a medium, there will be a ever increasing switch to visual and auditory for the experience. You know, once we get farther down the road in terms of like your Amazons, Echoes, or Series, you know, that there's a lot that will be able to do in the future. You know, the other thing is going to be augmented reality. You know, as much as I say it's not like consumer ready right now, that doesn't mean that someone's not cooking up something that's going to come out in a couple of years and just change the game. Because when it's right in front of you, all of the rules that we know about user experience, and I get into arguments with user experience designers about this, because I believe that augmented reality will really be the death of experience design as we know it. Because using a two-dimensional screen in the metaphor, most of what we're doing is we're seeking and finding, right? It's about accessing a feature or accessing information or what have you. But if it's with you all the time, your primary interaction model will be stumble upon, right? Or like, instead of grabbing a remote to change the TV, I can look at the TV, it identifies that it's the TV, and I will then have the controls presented to me. You know, it completely flips that model. And that's one of the things that I love about the idea of experience in an augmented world is, how do you turn the world into your experience trigger? And I think that's going to be foundationally different. Like I think everything that we know, every pattern that we're used to is just going to have to be at the very least changed,
Hmm.
or better yet, tossed out. It's exciting.
Well, all that Minority Report stuff, I think somebody told me once that Minority Report was Steven Spielberg was the director and the producer on that, and that he had people like yourself, like these, and like other people, the futurists, sort of sit around a room and hypothesize where things were going to go. And I mean, Minority Report's been out for how long now? And it's getting we're getting there with like the digital signage and all that. Oh my gosh, I mean, you and I could talk forever about this kind of stuff because it's so interesting and fascinating. I'm sure people's brains are like, ooh, like it's like how did it? But I thought it was just a website, just like coming back down to the basics. Well, I thought he just people in your family are probably like, well, he builds websites, obviously.
Perhaps. I mean, I don't know. I haven't discussed what I do too much with my in-laws. Um, I think they understand. I do, but I honestly, I have no gauge. Like, I don't know what I know that is different from what other people know.
Yeah,
Right. Like, I'm unable to separate that.
of course.
But I don't know. Every time I open my mouth, I think like I'm just saying stuff that everybody already knows.
No, but they don't. But like I'm like my mind is blown. I mean I don't know, I've known you a long time, and I still don't. I still didn't know all of the to the extent of all the stuff that you do. So how can people reach you if they want to find out more about what you do and how you help and all that other stuff? How can people reach you?
Well, I'm at home, um, but
Well, they
also
can't
you
go to
can
your
reach me.
house. What?
Yeah, don't come to my house. No, you can reach me at wearetension.com. And you can reach me specifically at Adam at wearetension.com, or my business partner, Glenn, Glenn at wearetension.com. Yeah, I'm happy to have a chat about anything.
Yeah, because it's kind of, I mean, as I said, like I still, it's funny because sometimes, as I said, I've known you a long time. I looked at your website. I think I get an idea of what you do, but this is actually just taking it to a whole different dimension altogether. I think you're living so far into the future, Adam. You have no idea. You're already there. You're already way so far in the future that people are like, what the hell did he just say for the past? I have no idea. I get it a little bit, but it's still pretty mind-boggling. And
Oh,
you're so immersed in it, you're like,
I
well,
mean, I hope it was informative.
no, it was for me.
I
I
don't
think
know.
it's really fascinating. I think it's really interesting. It's really cool.
Well,
So
fortunately, I enjoy it as well.
yeah, no, and that's it. That's your why, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the one thing I want to tell everybody, anybody that's watching before or now or like later or whatever, well, they couldn't watch before, but later if they're watching, to share their biggest takeaway, their biggest aha moment. If there's anything that you learned, please, put that in the comments. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I'm so excited that we got to talk about this kind of stuff, and I'm sure some of our old friends from MetaConsult will be like, I remember that guy, that
I hope not.
that troublemaker from back then. It was like the .com era. It was such a wild time. I made the most amazing friends that are still my friends to this day from that .com, even though it was not an easy, as you know, we won't even go down that rabbit hole. It was not easy for me that year, but it was a wild, wild ride in that .com time frame. Anyway, so it was crazy. And so next week, I'm talking with a gal. Her name is Kimberly Black. And so Kimberly and I used to teach at the college. We met because her class was before mine. My class was after hers. And she's been through a lot in the past year or so, or more, really. So as an educator, public speaker, and a research, and her personal experiences. And she's been, I mean, people have to wait. Hopefully, you're going to watch next week, Adam, because this woman, it's just mind-blowing what she's been through. And so she's helping focus on women to build resilience and confront life's adversities with courage, and how to really get people, how to, not only just women, and how to deal with adversity through change, but how men can support women through the change of adversity. And she was a victim of something that was very violent, and so I'm really interested to hearing her story, because she's really sort of flipped the script on it, and really turned into a survivor and a thriver from the adversity that she's experienced. And so I know I'm going to be emotional next week when I talk to her. I'm going to be so choked up, but I hope we're going to have a lot of fun talking about how to take those those challenges, which, I've known you long enough. We've both been through some challenges, and to the right person, it can make you stronger, and you learn from it. And So I'm excited to talk to Kimberly next week. So thank you again, Adam. I know we're
My
going to
pleasure.
be talking online soon enough because, you know, I see you on at 3 o'clock in the morning when I wake up in the middle of the night with my insomnia. And I'm like, hey, Adam, what are you doing still up? So I guess I'll see you there.
I'm going to try not to do that tonight, but yeah, soon.
Right, right. Yeah. And as I'm like, you're up at 3 and your kids are getting up at what time? Uh,
6.
yeah. So you've got like, what, 3 hours of sleep? So hope, hope you take advantage
It,
of the power
that,
naps.
it's enough guesting for a couple of days.
Anyway, thank you so much, Adam. Talk to you
Thank you so much.
soon. Okay, bye for now.
Bye.